I started that hike early, the way I usually did when I wanted to be alone. The parking area was empty except for my car. No fresh tire tracks, no other engines cooling down. Just a thin layer of dust on the gravel and the quiet you only get far from towns. I signed the trail register, tightened my boots, adjusted my pack, and stepped onto the ridge trail as the morning light came through the trees. The trail followed the spine of the ridge, narrow and packed hard by years of boots. On one side, the ground dropped steeply into a wooded valley. On the other side, it rolled upward into thicker brush and rock. It was the kind of trail where sound carries oddly. Wind moves differently up there. You hear birds from far away and water from creeks you never see. I settled into a steady pace. Not fast, not slow. Just enough to keep warm in the cool air. My breathing fell into a rhythm. My boots hit dirt and stone in the same pattern every step. I liked that feeling, the way time stretches out when there is nothing to rush toward. About 2 hours in, after the trail curved around a long outcrop of rock, I became aware of footsteps behind me. At first, I didn't think much of it. Trails get busier as the day goes on. Someone else had probably started later and was moving at about my speed. The sound wasn't close. It stayed just far enough back that I couldn't hear breathing or gear, only boots on dirt and the soft crack of small stones shifting. I kept walking and didn't turn around. I didn't want to be rude or awkward. I assumed they would pass eventually or fall back. After a few minutes, I noticed something that didn't sit right. The rhythm of the footsteps behind me matched mine almost perfectly. When my left boot hit, there's hit. When I adjusted my stride to step over roots, the sound adjusted with me. It felt less like someone walking their own hike and more like an echo following me. I slowed down slightly just to see. My steps became heavier and more spaced out. The footsteps behind me slowed too. I stopped at a wide spot on the trail where the ridge flattened and pulled out my water bottle. I took a long drink, letting the cold water calm me down. I stood there for almost a minute, staring out at the trees below, waiting for the person behind me to come into view. The footsteps stopped. When I finally turned around, the trail behind me was empty. No movement, no color that didn't belong to the woods. The trail stretched back through a bend and disappeared between trees. I could see far enough that someone should have been visible if they were close. I told myself the sound had been my imagination or maybe my own steps echoing strangely along the ridge. Sound does weird things in places like that. I put the bottle away and kept walking. 10 minutes later, the footsteps came back. This time, I didn't feel calm about it. The sound was clear and steady, like someone wearing solid boots, not trail runners. Still not close, still not far. Just behind me, always behind me. I stopped again, faster this time, and turned around immediately. Nothing. No movement. No shape shifting between trees. The trail was empty again. I started paying attention to everything. The way the wind moved through the leaves, the calls of birds, the sound of my pack straps brushing against my shirt. Every noise felt louder, sharper. The footsteps returned after a few more minutes, and this time they stayed longer. For over an hour, the same thing kept happening. I would walk, and the footsteps would follow. I would slow down, and they would slow down. I would stop, and they would stop. Every time I turned around, there was no one there. The sound never got closer. It never drifted farther away. It stayed locked in place, like whoever was back there knew exactly how far to remain. My thoughts started spiraling despite my efforts to stay logical. I thought about how long the ridge trail was, how far I was from my car, how poor cell service usually was up there. I told myself there had to be a simple explanation. Another hiker playing a stupid game. Someone walking just out of sight. An animal moving in the brush in a strange way. But animals don't match pace. And they don't stop cleanly when you stop. The trail narrowed again and passed through a section of thicker trees. The light dimmed. The air felt cooler and heavier. I felt watched in a way I hadn't before. Not like something was jumping out at me, but like something was studying how I moved. My heart rate stayed high. My mouth felt dry no matter how much water I drank. I kept checking my watch, marking time, hoping the sound would stop on its own. Didn't. Finally, I reached a point where the trail ran straight for a good stretch. I could see far ahead and far behind if I turned around quickly. That was when I decided to try something different. I stepped off the trail to the side and moved a few feet into the brush. I stood there completely still, holding my breath. I made sure no part of me touched loose branches or leaves. The footsteps continued for a moment, still behind where I had been walking. Then they changed. The sound shifted forward. Very slowly, very clearly, I heard heavy boots walk past the spot where I had stepped off. The steps stayed on the trail. They didn't hesitate. They didn't speed up or slow down. They just kept going forward at the same steady pace I had been walking. I watched the trail with my full attention, expecting to see legs, a shadow, anything. Nothing appeared. The sound moved farther ahead, still steady, still confident. Then it faded around the bend in the trail like someone continuing their hike without a second thought. I stayed frozen in the brush long after the sound was gone. My legs felt weak. My hands were shaking. I knew then that whatever had been following me was not behind me anymore. It had passed me. That was enough. I didn't return to the trail. I turned downhill and started moving through the trees, pushing through brush and loose dirt, sliding in places, not caring about scratches or torn clothing. I just wanted distance. I just wanted to be somewhere open. After a long, exhausting descent, I hit a service road. It was old and rutted, but it felt like safety. I followed it at a near jog until my legs burned. When I finally reached the parking area and saw my car, relief hit me so hard I had to lean against the door before unlocking it. I drove away without looking back. Later that night, after I had showered and cleaned the dirt from my cuts, I couldn't stop thinking about the footsteps. I opened my laptop and searched for the trail, scrolling through recent hike reports and log entries. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Multiple hikers had posted about the same experience, being followed for long stretches, hearing footsteps that matched their pace, stopping and turning around to find no one there. A few mentioned stepping off the trail and hearing someone pass without seeing anything. No one mentioned seeing a face. No one mentioned an explanation. A month later, I checked again. The park had closed that section of the ridge trail. No detailed reason was given, just a notice about safety concerns and ongoing investigation. I haven't been back to that trail since. I still hike alone sometimes, but I choose busier places now, places where sound doesn't stretch and bend the way it does on long ridges. Even now, when I walk on quiet trails, I pay attention to my pace. And when I hear footsteps behind me, I don't wait anymore. I started the hike just after sunrise, exactly the way I always did when I wanted to avoid crowds. Early light, cool air, empty parking lot. The gravel crunched under my tires as I pulled in, and I remember noticing how still everything felt. No other cars, no engines cooling, no doors slamming, just my own movement in a place that felt like it hadn't been touched yet that morning. I signed the trail register with my name, date, planned loop, and expected return time. 8 miles. Easy loop. I had printed the map directly from the state park website the night before and folded it neatly into my pocket. I checked it one more time while standing at the trailhead. Clear lines, clean loop, nothing confusing. I had done longer hikes on worse trails without any trouble. The first stretch went exactly as expected. The path was wide and packed down, bordered by low brush and tall pines. Sunlight filtered through the canopy in broken stripes. I crossed the small creek where the map showed it would be, stepping on flat stones that were already worn smooth by years of boots. The elevation gain matched the contour lines. Every bend in the trail lined up with what I had memorized the night before. I checked my GPS once, saw I was right where I should be, and put my phone back into airplane mode to save battery. I didn't want to be one of those people who depended on a screen for everything. I trusted the map. I trusted the park. I trusted that a well-marked state trail wouldn't suddenly turn into a problem. About 3 miles in, I noticed the first thing that didn't match. There was a wooden post beside the trail, old but upright, with a metal plate bolted to it. The numbers were stamped deep and clear. Trail 12B. I stopped and stared at it longer than I needed to. My map didn't show anything like that. There was no 12B anywhere on it, just a simple loop labeled Trail 7. I looked around, expecting to see a faded arrow or a smaller sign pointing off somewhere else, but the marker was planted right next to the path I was on. I assumed it was outdated. Parks reuse trails. Signs get forgotten. I had seen that before. I made a mental note and kept walking. The trail began to narrow after that. Not sharply, not suddenly, but enough that I noticed my arms brushing closer to branches on either side. The ground under my boots felt softer, less compacted. The forest grew thicker, darker, the trees closer together. The air felt heavier, like it wasn't moving at all. I realized after a while that I couldn't hear birds anymore. No calls, no wing flutters. Even the insects were quiet. The only sounds were my own breathing and the dull thud of my boots hitting dirt. Then I reached a fork. I stopped at the split and pulled the map out again. According to the map, there shouldn't have been a fork at all. Just a single path curving gently east. But here I was, standing between two worn trails that split cleanly around a cluster of trees. Both paths looked equally used. Both had footprints pressed into the dirt. Both disappeared into the forest with the same narrow shape. I stood there longer than I should have, scanning the ground, the trees, the space between them. I told myself trails change. Storms knock trees down. Rangers rear out paths. Erosion happens. The left trail looked slightly more worn, slightly more open. I chose it and stepped forward. The forest seemed to close in almost immediately. The light dimmed. The path dipped and rose in ways the map didn't show. I walked another mile, maybe a little more, before something in my chest tightened enough that I stopped again. I pulled my phone out and checked the GPS. The dot showing my position wasn't on the map trail anymore. It was drifting off it, slowly, steadily, as if I had been walking at an angle the entire time without realizing it. I zoomed out, then in. The trail line stayed where it was supposed to be. I wasn't on it. I told myself GPS drift happens. Tree cover interferes. I took a few more steps, then stopped completely and listened. Somewhere ahead of me, a branch snapped. It wasn't the light, quick sound of a small animal. It was heavy, deliberate, the kind of sound made when weight shifts slowly from one foot to another. I stood still, holding my breath without meaning to. After a few seconds, there was another snap. Closer this time. I turned around. The fork was gone. The trail behind me was a single path, smooth and packed down, curving away exactly like it always had. No sign of a split. No scuffed ground where two trails had once divided. It looked like it had never been anything else. I felt a rush of heat in my face and neck. I told myself I must have walked farther than I thought. I must have passed the fork without noticing. That explanation didn't sit right, but I grabbed onto it anyway. I started walking faster. The snapping sound continued, always ahead of me. Every time I slowed down, it slowed too. When I stopped, it stopped. I never heard it retreat. I never heard it circle. Stayed in front, just out of sight. I checked the ground and noticed boot prints pressed into the dirt. Deep, fresh, the edges still sharp. They weren't mine. They were larger, heavier, and they all faced the same direction I was moving. I broke into a jog. My breathing grew loud in my ears. Sweat soaked through my shirt despite the cool air. The trail seemed to stretch on without changing. The same trees, the same bends, repeating in a way that made my stomach twist. My GPS signal dropped completely. The screen went blank, then flickered back on, showing nothing but gray. I didn't shout. I didn't call out. Something about the silence told me not to. I followed the trail because it was the only option. Turning off into the woods felt worse. The snapping continued, steady and controlled. My legs burned. My thoughts narrowed down to one simple goal. Keep moving. The light began to fade, the sky above the trees turning dull and colorless. Just when panic was starting to push past what I could control, the trail widened suddenly and dumped me onto a fire road. Gravel, open space, tire tracks. The snapping stopped instantly. I stood there bent over, hands on my knees trying to slow my breathing. The forest behind me was quiet and still, like nothing had ever been wrong. I followed the fire road until I reached the edge of the park near the ranger station. The building lights were on. The parking lot was half full now. Normal sounds returned. Voices, doors, engines. Inside, I gave my name and explained that I had come out on the fire road instead of finishing the loop. Paperwork was pulled out. Logs were checked. My name was already written in the incident log. The date was correct. The time was close to when I should have still been on the trail. Trail 12B was listed beside it. Notes mentioned repeated reports over the years. Hikers drifting off mapped trails. Feeling followed. Trails changing. The route had been unofficial for a long time and officially closed, though the signs had never all been removed. I drove home after that, hands tight on the wheel the entire way. That night, when I unpacked my gear, I found dirt on my boots that didn't match the soil anywhere else in the park. Packed darker, denser, pressed deep into the tread, like it had been stepped into repeatedly. I haven't hiked alone since, and I never trust printed maps without questioning what they don't show. I picked that trail because it was supposed to be boring. A steady climb, nothing technical, no views worth posting. The kind of hike people skip because it doesn't offer much reward. That usually means fewer people, and fewer people meant quiet. I parked at the trailhead just after sunrise. The lot had room for maybe 6 cars. Mine was the only one there. No fresh footprints in the dust. No empty coffee cups or wrappers in the bushes. The signboard was faded and cracked, the map barely readable. I checked it anyway, mostly out of habit, and started up the trail. The climb began immediately, a slow, steady incline through thick trees. The ground was dry, packed dirt with patches of exposed roots. The air smelled like pine and old leaves. Birds were active early, flitting from branch to branch, but even they seemed to quiet down as I climbed higher. About halfway up, I noticed the scratches. At first I saw just one tree, tall pine, thick bark. 3 long vertical marks carved straight down the trunk. Deep enough that the lighter would show through. They were clean lines, not jagged. Evenly spaced, like someone had measured the distance between them. I stopped and looked closer. The mark started about 7 feet off the ground and ran down another 2 feet. I stood on my toes and reached as high as I could. I wasn't even close to the top of them. I stepped back and scanned the area, expecting to see more. I didn't have to look far. The next tree had them too, and the next. As I continued up the trail, I realized the scratches were everywhere. Every tree close enough to the path had them. Same pattern, same height, same spacing. Some were older, darkened with age. Others were fresh, the wood pale and raw, small curls of bark still clinging to the edges. They didn't look like bare marks. I'd seen those before. These were too straight, too careful. Animals don't stop at the same height every time. I kept walking, but slower now. My eyes moved constantly, checking the trees, the ground, the spaces between trunks. The forest felt tighter, like the trail was cutting through something it wasn't meant to. The scratches continued for nearly a mile. They never drifted farther from the trail. They didn't wander or fade. They followed it precisely, as if whoever made them had stayed close to the path the entire time. Then, just as suddenly as they began, they stopped. The trail leveled out and the trees thinned. I stepped into a clearing that felt wrong immediately. The ground was flat, unnaturally so, like it had been pressed down over time. In the center sat an old fire ring made of stacked stones. No fresh ash, no recent burn smell, just blackened rock and soil darkened by years of use. Around it, the grass was flattened in wide circles. Not trampled randomly, but worn down evenly, like people or something had moved around it again and again. I took a few careful steps closer and noticed the footprints. Bare feet. They were pressed into the dirt all around the campsite, overlapping and crossing over each other. Some were clear, toes visible, heels deep. Others were smeared and dragged, as if whoever made them had been unsteady or tired. The sizes varied slightly, but not enough to suggest children. They looked adult, just worn and uneven. There were no shoe prints, no boot marks, nothing modern. The footprints circled the fire ring repeatedly, looping back on themselves. Some paths crossed so many times the ground was worn smooth. I tried to count how many times someone might have walked around it, but there were too many layers. I didn't hear anything while I stood there. No wind, no birds. The clearing felt sealed off, like sound didn't want to move through it. I didn't stay long. Every instinct I had told me not to linger. I backed away slowly, keeping my eyes on the ground, then turned and started back down the trail. The descent should have been easier, gravity helping instead of fighting me. But my legs felt tight, my steps cautious. I kept glancing at the trees, expecting to see the scratches again. They weren't there. The first tree I passed on the way down had clean bark. No marks, no scars. I stopped and walked back a few steps, checking another trunk. Nothing. I moved farther down, heart starting to pound. Every tree was clean. I knew exactly where I had seen them before. I remembered specific trunks, the way the marks caught the light. Now there was nothing. The bark was intact, rough and untouched, like no one had ever dragged anything sharp across it. I picked up my pace, trying not to let panic take over. The forest felt different now. Not quieter, but heavier, like I was being watched without any effort to hide it. I didn't stop again until I reached the trailhead. My car was still alone in the lot. That gave me some relief until I got closer. There were handprints on the hood. Bare handprints pressed into the dust. Palms flat, fingers spread. They were smudged, not clean impressions, like someone had leaned their weight into them. The fingers were long, longer than mine, the palms wider. There were several sets, overlapping, angled in different directions. I stood there staring at them, my keys tight in my hand. I hadn't touched the hood when I parked. I knew that, and no one else had been there when I left. I wiped them off with my sleeve, fast and rough, like getting rid of something dirty. The dust smeared and fell away, leaving faint streaks behind. I didn't try to clean it properly. I just wanted them gone. I got in the car and drove off without looking back. Later, at home, I checked my arms and legs and found thin red scratches I couldn't remember getting. Nothing deep, nothing bleeding, just lines running straight and even. I washed them, locked my doors, and slept with the lights on that night. I haven't gone back to that trail. I don't plan to. Some places don't want to be walked through, and I learned that paying attention too late can still be enough to get noticed. I was already tired by the time I reached mile 7. Not exhausted, but that deep, steady fatigue that settles into your legs when you've been moving for hours without a long break. The trail had been quiet all morning. No voices, no distant laughter, no fresh boot prints in the dirt. Just me, the trees, and the sound of my breathing. That was why the backpack stood out immediately. It was sitting just off the trail, leaning against the base of a thick pine like someone had set it down carefully and stepped away for a minute. Not tossed, not hidden, placed. The straps were arranged neatly, shoulder pads facing outward, hip belt unclipped and resting flat on the ground. It was a good pack, the kind you don't buy unless you hike a lot or plan to be out for days. Dark gray, still clean, no sun fade. One of the mesh side pockets had a small tear, and the bottom had scuff marks from being set down on rock. It looked used, but not abused. I slowed and looked up and down the trail, expecting to see someone just ahead or just behind me. Maybe they had stepped off the path to use the bathroom or check a map. I waited a few seconds, listening. Nothing. The forest was still. No footsteps. No rustling that sounded human. Just wind moving high in the branches. I called out once, not loud, just enough to be polite. My voice sounded wrong out there, thin and out of place. There was no answer. I told myself not to touch it. You don't mess with other people's gear. But the longer I stood there, the less sense it made. If someone had stepped away briefly, they wouldn't leave a full pack like that on a popular trail. And if something had happened to them, that pack mattered. I crouched beside it and checked the main zipper. It wasn't locked. I opened it slowly, half expecting someone to step out of the trees and catch me in the act. Inside, everything was packed properly. Food bags sealed and labeled, a lightweight stove, extra socks rolled tight, a rain shell folded cleanly, a first aid kit clipped to the inner pocket. This wasn't abandoned trash. This was someone's entire plan for being out there. I dug a little deeper and found a paper map folded into a clear sleeve. The official trail was marked, but someone had drawn over it in red marker. A route cut off from the trail at a sharp angle, straight into dense forest where no trail was shown. It didn't wander or follow terrain lines. It went straight like a line drawn with purpose. At the end of that red line was a circled X. I stared at it longer than I should have. There was also a phone in the top pocket. It was dead completely. No case. No emergency contacts written on it. No wallet anywhere in the pack. No ID. No emergency beacon clipped to the straps, which was strange for someone carrying that much gear. That was when I should have turned around. Instead, I zipped the pack back up exactly how I found it and stood there trying to convince myself there was a simple explanation. Someone exploring an off-trail route. Someone who stepped away and would come back any minute. Someone who dropped their pack earlier and I was overthinking it. I marked the spot on my GPS and continued down the trail, telling myself I'd report it when I got back to the car. The next mile felt longer than the previous 7. The trail narrowed and dipped through darker sections of forest where the sun barely reached the ground. Every time I heard a sound, my body tensed. I kept glancing ahead, expecting to see someone walking toward me, maybe looking worried, maybe missing their pack. I saw no one. When the trail bent slightly to the right and opened into a small clearing, I noticed the backpack immediately. It was sitting beside the trail again, leaning against a tree in the same way. The same pack, same scuff marks on the bottom, same tear in the mesh pocket, same color, same shape. My first thought was that I had somehow looped back without realizing it, but that didn't make sense. I checked my GPS. The track showed a straight line forward. No loop, no backtracking. Mile 8 was clearly ahead of where I had been. I didn't move closer at first. I stood on the trail, staring at it, my mind trying to force logic into place. The forest around me felt suddenly tight, like the space had closed in without me noticing. I took a few slow steps toward the pack, every instinct telling me not to. I didn't open it this time. I didn't touch it at all. I just looked at it, memorizing every detail, making sure I wasn't imagining the match. It was identical. That was the moment something shifted in my chest. Not panic exactly, but certainty. A clear, heavy understanding that I didn't know what was happening and that staying on that trail was a bad idea. I didn't run. Running makes mistakes. I turned around, stepped off the trail, and pulled out my compass. I picked a bearing that would take me downhill toward the road and started moving through the trees, careful but fast. Bushwhacking is never clean. Branches grabbed at my clothes. Rocks rolled under my boots. The ground sloped unevenly, forcing me to stop and adjust constantly. I focused on the compass needle and nothing else. I didn't look back. I didn't let myself think about the pack or the red line on the map. After what felt like hours but was probably less than one, I hit the service road. I stepped onto the gravel and felt my shoulders drop for the first time since mile 7. I followed it until I reached my car, unlocked it, and sat inside with the doors locked, hands shaking on the steering wheel. I didn't drive right away. I just sat there, listening to the engine idle, letting my breathing slow down. When I got home, I cleaned my gear and tried to forget about the backpack. That didn't work. A few days later, I contacted the park and reported what I had found. I gave them the mile marker. I described the pack and its contents. I told them about the map and the off-trail route. Search and rescue contacted me later. They told me a solo hiker had gone missing in that area weeks earlier. Experienced, well-equipped, last known location somewhere near the ridge. His pack had never been recovered. They asked me questions. A lot of them. I answered everything honestly except one thing. I didn't mention seeing the backpack twice. I still hike, but I don't pick up abandoned gear anymore. And when I see something on the side of a trail that looks too carefully placed, I keep walking. I had been on the trail since early morning, moving at an easy pace and stopping often to drink water and check my map. It was one of those long loop hikes that stayed quiet even on weekends. Dense forest, rolling terrain, Nothing dramatic. The kind of place people underestimate because it doesn't look dangerous on paper. By noon, the sun was high enough to cut through the trees in bright patches. I had just passed a faded mile marker and was thinking about where to stop for lunch when I heard it. 3 short whistle blasts. They were sharp and clean, not bird-like, not wind. Human. Close enough that I felt it in my chest more than my ears. Anyone who spends time outdoors knows what that sound means. It's drilled into you. 3 blasts is a distress signal. Someone needs help. I didn't hesitate. I turned off the trail and started moving toward the sound immediately. I didn't think about staying on the path or marking my location. I didn't think about why I hadn't heard voices or movement. My body reacted before my brain had time to catch up. The whistle blew again. Same pattern, same spacing, still close, always just ahead. I pushed through brush, stepped over fallen logs, climbed small rises without slowing down. The forest thickened quickly. The ground turned uneven, covered in loose leaves that slid under my boots. I expected at any moment to break through into a clearing or see someone sitting injured on a rock. It didn't happen. Every time I thought I was about to reach the source, the sound repeated again, still just out of sight. It never echoed. It never faded. It stayed at the same distance no matter how fast I moved. After about 20 minutes, my breathing was hard and my legs were burning. That was when the thought finally hit me that something wasn't right. I stopped and looked around. Nothing looked familiar. The trees were thicker here, older. The understory was dense and tangled. There were no trail signs, no cut branches, no signs of foot traffic. I checked my GPS and felt a tight knot form in my stomach. I was far off the marked trail, deeper than I had realized. The whistle didn't sound again. The silence that followed was heavy and complete. No wind, no birds, just my breathing loud and fast. I stood still, letting my heart slow down, telling myself to calm down and think clearly. That was when I noticed the tape. At first I thought it was trash caught on branches, bright strips of faded color fluttering weakly in the air. But then I saw more of it, and more. Survey tape, tied around branches at knee height, waist height, even higher up. Yellow and orange, sun-bleached and brittle. Some pieces were torn, hanging by a thread. Others were wrapped tightly, like someone had taken time to secure them. They weren't marking a trail. They were scattered, overlapping, crossing each other in confusing ways. If anything, they made it harder to see where you were going. I took a careful step forward and nearly fell. The ground dipped suddenly under my boot. Not deep, but enough to throw me off balance. I caught myself and looked down. It was a pit, shallow, maybe 2 feet deep, dug into the earth and covered loosely with leaves and sticks. From a distance, it blended perfectly with the forest floor. Once I saw one, I saw several more. They were spread out irregularly, some close together, others farther apart. Not deep enough to kill someone outright, but deep enough to twist an ankle, break a leg, or leave you injured and unable to move quickly. My skin went cold. This wasn't random. This wasn't old camping activity or erosion. Someone had planned this. Someone had marked the area and shaped the ground deliberately. I backed away slowly, lifting my feet carefully and placing them where I was sure the ground was solid. I didn't turn around. I didn't rush. Every step felt loud, even though I knew I was barely making noise. When I felt confident I was out of the marked area, I turned and retraced my path as best I could, using my compass and GPS together, correcting my direction constantly. Took far longer than it should have. Every time the forest shifted slightly, panic flared again. Eventually, after what felt like hours, I broke back onto the official trail. I didn't stop until I reached my car. That night, safe at home, I couldn't let it go. I searched online, digging through old reports, local news archives, forum posts from hikers and hunters. Took time, but eventually I found references to the area I had wandered into. Years earlier, parts of that forest had been used by illegal trappers and scavengers. People who didn't want attention. People who wanted others to come to them quietly. Whistles had been reported. Distress signals used to draw hikers off trail. Survey tape used to mark zones and guide movement without obvious signs. Several hikers had gone missing over the years. A few were found injured and disoriented, unable to explain how they had left the trail. Others were never found at all. The people responsible were never caught. The area had been quietly closed and reopened more than once. Boundaries shifted, warnings vague. Official explanations were always thin. I haven't responded to a whistle in the woods since. I still carry one. I still know the signal. But now, when I hear unexplained sound in the forest, I stop first. I look around. I think, some lessons only get one chance.